What is up, everyone? My name is Ramba Mamba, and in this video we're going to be making our player that's able to move around like we did in the last episode, and we have a crop progression, and we're adding watering. And if you don't water the plant after a few seconds, the plant will die. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to add our watering animation. So I'm actually going to go online and download a PNG image of a water droplet, which I already have downloaded, and I'll import it by right-clicking, import new asset, and then I'll just import the water. And inside the import settings, I'll change the texture type from default to Sprite, 2D, and UI, and I will apply this. So now we got our little water droplet. What I'm actually thinking about using this water droplet for is I'm going to be using it to make a particle system to do a watering animation. So I'm not an expert at this. I just spent 10 minutes looking at it. Honestly, I'm not 100% on what I'm doing here. So I suggest that you do some more research, but this will be a quick solution. It doesn't look the greatest. It doesn't look the most realistic, but this is just the way that I'm going to be doing it. You can right click on our player, and I'm going to be adding effects, and then I'll be adding a particle system. I'll move this particle system up to the player's camera. So a particle system is an emission system, and we can use this to emit water when we want. So the first thing I'm going to do is disable looping, and I'm going to disable play on awake. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the 3D start size. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to set it to 0.2. I'm also going to increase the max particles. And then if we go over into emission, if we open this up, we can increase the rate over time, and we can see how this looks. So if I click play, so that's what it looks like right now. And now we can just increase this or decrease this. And I'm also going to decrease the duration to about 2. So this is just about playing around with it. You just really want to just play around with this. And for the shape, we can also mess around with this. We can decrease the angle and stuff. So now if we hit play, and we look through the camera, this is what it would look like. Well, that's obviously what we don't want. We want it to be pointing down at the ground. So I can press R or E, and then I can rotate this down. So now if we try to play this, that looks a little better. Right, and now to make it so that this water animation, this water sprite actually plays, we can go to texture sheet animation. I'm going to select the checkbox on it so it's activated. And then I'm going to change the mode from grid to sprites. And then for the sprite, I'll drag in the sprite. And so now if we hit play, it shouldn't actually do anything because we don't have play on start and looping on. But we can see here, if we click play, now we got the water animation playing. Perfect. So the next thing that we want to do is I'm going to rename this to something like watering. And I'm actually also going to add a box collider to our plant. And this box collider, don't worry, it will not actually collide. It will be a trigger, so that way we know when we start our watering, we're actually watering this plant. So I'm going to head over to my plant. I'm going to add component, add a box collider. And I'm going to edit the bounds. So I'll move the box collider up. And then I would also scale it so that looks nice. And I'm also going to make sure is trigger is selected. So now we can actually open up our plant growth script and double click on it. So I'm going to make a reference to that particle system we made, public particle system. Watering particles made. And I'll also make a timer that will show how long between the next time that you have to water. So I can do private float must water timer. And I'll make a public float this time. That will be a default time that you have to wait, but default time that the plant will die if you don't water in between that time. So public float must water default. And now we can actually set in void start the default is equal to the timer. So the timer is equal to the default. So must water timer is equal to must water default. And in void update, we want to constantly be decreasing the time it has before you're forced to water it. Otherwise, the plant will die. So we can do must water timer minus equals time.delta time. And lastly, if the must water timer, or the must water timer, yeah, how much time that we have left between the next water is less than 0, meaning we've waited the max amount, then we actually want the plant to die. So I'll just put in a comma right there for now that says die. And let's make this function that will determine when the plant dies. So under void growth, I'll do public void plant die. And now what we want to do here is first we want to set all stages of a plant to deactivate it. So we can do that using a for loop. In I is equal to 0. And the way a for loop works is that we got to tell it a starting point, which is 0. And we got to tell it to keep on going until a maximum value. So we want to keep on going until all of the childs are set to deactivated. So it's less than child count. And then lastly, we want to increase I by 1 each time we do this. So I'll remove that. For each child, we want to set it to deactivate. So we can do this using GameObject.transform.getChild I. The GameObject.setActive false. So now everything is false, and after that we want to set our dead stage to be active. So I'll actually make that right now. First I'll just create a material by right-clicking, material, and I'll call it dead. I'll change the color to red. And then under a plant, I'll create another stage. And for me, I'll just create another box, and I'll deactivate it. I'll set it to dead, and then I'll also give it this material. So I don't actually have a dead stage for my plant because I was too lazy to find one online or make it. But if you have one, just put it in, or you can just put in your dirt pile or your stage 1, or you can just set nothing, empty game object if you want it to die and just not be there. So I'll save this. Go here. After we set this active, we want to set the last, very, very last object active. So GameObject.transform.getChild transform.childCount. So -1 because child count is the amount of childs we have plus 1 basically. GameObject.setActive true. So now we set our dead stage active using this. Now, we want to have a place where you can water your plant, and we can reset this timer that we have here. And I'll actually replace this comment with plant die. So this timer right here is always going down, okay? And if it's less than 0, then we kill the plant. But we want a way to reset this timer in the case that we water a plant. So we can just do that using a built-in function of Unity called onTriggerStay. So if you notice, we created a box collider for our plant that was actually on trigger. And what we can say is that once we enter this box collider and we start watering it, give our plant water and reset this timer. So I'm going to do public void onTriggerStay. I'm going to replace this enter with onTriggerStay. And it'll autofill all of this. So now we can check if the collider that entered that box collider is our player. So if other.compareTime. And now we have to give it a tag to compare against. So let's actually create this right now. So on my player, I'm going to go to tags. I'm going to add a tag. I'm gonna create one. I'm gonna call it player. I'm gonna save it. So for my tag, I'll select player, and I'll also put it on my mesh, and I'll set it to player. So if you're just making your own character, just set the player's mesh collider to be equal to the tag to player. And now we can go into our code again. And so if other.compare tag, and we named it player. So if the player is inside of the plant's area, then we want to water it. But first we want to check if the player, even if the player is just walking over it, we don't want to water it. We want to check if the player presses a certain button that will water. So if input.get key down, key code.p, I'll just use p to water in my game. Then I would like to play my particle system. So remember we made a reference to that at the very top, watering particles, so I'll copy that. Watering particles.play, we'll play that particle system, and then we'll reset our timer. So must water timer is equal to the default, must water default. Perfect, so now we can save this, go into Unity, and so let's set our default water, the time between that you're forced to water. So let's put something like 7. So every 7 seconds you have to water your plant. And I'll also drag in particle system. So our particle system was on our player and we called it water. So I'll drag that in here. And now if we hit play, so you can see that the plant died after 7 seconds, but I think plant actually got moved up a little. But if we water it, it should never transform into the cube. Because remember, the cube is our... And I can't water it when I'm far away. If I'm really close to it, next to the box color, I can water it. And the plant doesn't die. But if I leave it alone for 7 seconds, it dies and becomes a box. See, it becomes a box. So, remember, you can just replace this box with your dead stage. And then your plant will die unless you water it. And you can always play around with this number. You can make it something realistic, like 10 minutes instead of 7 seconds, you know? But that's just all up to your preference. And I'll leave you here to test it out and play with this. But I hope that helped. Learn how your plants have to be watered, otherwise they'll die.